My husband ended our 22-year marriage the way you cancel a subscription. A courier knocked on my door at 9:10 on a Tuesday morning and handed me an envelope with my name spelled wrong. Hannah, not Hannah. Like I was already a typo in my own life. Inside was the divorce petition and a message he'd instructed his lawyer to include on the cover sheet. Hannah, darling, you will receive nothing. The prenup ensures that. Do not contact me directly. No conversation. No warning. No explanation. Just paperwork designed to erase me. After 22 years of marriage, raising his children, holding his life together, he reduced me to a line item he thought he could delete. What he didn't realize was that the prenup he remembered wasn't the one that mattered. Because when we finally stood in front of a judge, she didn't ask how I felt. She didn't care about his tone. She opened a file, looked at his signature, and said, "We are going to read this clause aloud." And in that moment I knew something Mark had never learned. In a courtroom, your confidence doesn't matter. Your paper does. If you've ever had someone try to erase you with paperwork, stay with me. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe now, because this ends in court, with witnesses. And the quote that comes out of that judge's mouth turns my husband's whole life inside out. My name is Hannah Levy. I'm 52 years old. I live just outside Boston in a house I paid for in more ways than my husband ever counted. And I'm going to tell you exactly how Mark Levy tried to leave me with nothing. Then watched a judge read his own words out loud while the whole room listened. Mark and I met when I was 29 and he was 32. He was funny in a controlled way, the kind of man who could make a room laugh without ever looking like he wanted the attention. He worked in tech, not the hoodie and hype kind. The quiet kind that builds something useful, sells it to businesses, then tells everyone he just does software. When we met, he already had a small company. 2 employees, a rented office above a sandwich place. He talked about the future like it was already his, like success was waiting for him to show up and collect it. He said he wanted a partner, not a passenger. I believed him because I had my own job and my own spine. I wasn't looking for someone to carry me. I was looking for someone who could stand next to me. We married fast, not reckless. Efficient. Mark loved efficient. He treated romance like a project plan. Milestones, timelines, a tidy life. 3 months before our wedding, he slid a prenuptial agreement across the table at dinner like it was dessert. He said it was standard. He said his attorney recommended it. He said it wasn't personal. That's how Mark spoke about everything that was personal. Like emotions were a messy inconvenience he didn't have time for. The prenup was clean. Anything he owned before marriage stayed his. The business stayed his. If we divorced, I'd keep my income and whatever I held in my name. He'd pay a lump sum that wouldn't punish success. I remember one line that made my stomach tighten. Each party acknowledges they enter this marriage without reliance upon the other for future support. Mark smiled like he'd handed me something generous. It keeps lawyers from getting rich. I said, what if I take time off when we have kids? And that's the first time I saw the future trap, because he didn't answer like a husband. He answered like a man setting terms. He leaned back and laughed under his breath, like I'd said something cute and dumb. You won't, he said. I stared at him. Mark. He waved a hand. No, don't start. You're not that kind of woman. What kind of woman? The kind who quits, he said, flat and dismissive. The kind who gets soft and then acts shocked when life gets expensive. My face went hot. That's not what I said. He leaned forward, voice lower, like he was doing me a favor by explaining reality. Hannah, you love working. It's your whole thing. You'd go crazy at home. And I didn't marry someone who's going to turn into a dependent. Dependent. That word hit harder than any legal clause. I said I wouldn't be dependent. I'd be raising our kids. He gave me a look like he couldn't believe I needed that spelled out. And I'd be paying for everything while you play house. So yeah, dependent. Then he smiled again, like the cruelty was reasonable. Don't worry, he said. I'm not marrying you to carry you. I'm marrying you because you don't need me. It sounded like a compliment. It was a warning. I did what you're supposed to do. I got my own attorney. She suggested amendments. Mark listened with a polite smile and then said, "Sure, but keep it reasonable." Reasonable. That word did a lot of work in our marriage. We ended up with what he wanted, mostly. A lump sum if we divorced. A schedule that increased with each year of marriage. A clause that said if we had children and I became the primary caregiver, Mark would cover tuition and health insurance until they turned 18. It sounded fair. It sounded adult. We signed it in a law office. Notary stamp. 2 witnesses. A net file. Mark kissed me in the parking lot and said, "Now we never have to worry about it again." I remember thinking, good, because I don't want to imagine the world where it matters. Then life happened. The version where things change. 2 years in, Mark's company started growing. Slowly at first, then faster. New clients. Bigger contracts. More travel. More late nights. Around that same time, my mother had her first stroke. I was the only child nearby. My father was gone. My mother was alone in a condo in Quincy and refusing to admit she needed help. So I became the one who drove her to appointments, handled insurance calls, sat in waiting rooms with a folder on my lap. Mark called it a rough patch. I called it Tuesday. Then I got pregnant. We were happy, truly. I want to be honest about that. Our son Eli was born in 2005. Our daughter Sophie came in 2008. When Eli was 6 months old, Mark came home one night with a whiteboard marker still in his hand and said, "I need you to cover more at home for a while." I said, "How long is a while?" He didn't even look guilty. He looked irritated that I'd asked. "Just until I stabilize this," he said. "Don't make it complicated." That was the first time I learned just until can mean years. I kept working at first. I was in marketing. Good at it. I liked it. But I was also the one who could leave early when daycare called, the one who could stay home when Sophie had an ear infection, the one who could drive my mother to physical therapy. Mark's work was inflexible. Mine was adjustable. So I adjusted. By 2009, I was part-time. By 2010, I was fully remote, long before it was common, because it let me do the invisible work without looking like I'd quit. Mark told people I preferred it. He also told people he supported it. He never said he needed it. He needed someone to make his life frictionless so he could keep building his. His company became the kind with a real office, then 2 offices, then HR, then a CFO. In 2012, he sold a minority stake to a private group. That put money in his account and turned him into a different kind of man. Not louder, more certain, more entitled. By 2015, we moved into a bigger house in a better neighborhood. Mark started wearing suits that fit. He started saying words like equity and valuation at dinner like they were weather. I kept doing the same things. School forms, doctor appointments, my mother's increasing needs, homework, shopping, birthday parties, a kitchen that never stayed clean. Because I was the one at home, I became the one who knew everything about our life. Where the files were, where the passwords were, what bills were due, which contractors could be trusted. Mark called me organized like it was a personality quirk, not a survival skill. And then he started acting like I was the scenery in his success. It didn't happen all at once. It happened in phrases. "Can you handle this? I can't deal with that. You're better at those things." Then, in 2016, Mark asked me to come to his office. He said I needed to sign something. "Just bank paperwork," he said. The company was expanding. They wanted a new line of credit. His CFO didn't like the terms unless Mark provided additional personal guarantees. Mark said, "I need your signature because we're married." I asked, "Do I need to read it?" He smiled like I'd made a cute joke. "It's not the Constitution, Hannah. It's a credit agreement." But my mother had taught me something before she lost her speech. If you sign it, you own it. So I sat down, opened the packet, and started reading. That's when I felt the ambush. Because behind the credit agreement, clipped like an afterthought, was a separate document. 2 pages. titled Marital Contribution Acknowledgement. Mark had already signed it. There was a blank line for me. A blank line for a notary. A date. I looked up at him. What is this? He didn't answer right away. He looked at his CFO. Like he wanted her there for this part. Her name was Marissa. Neat hair. Sharp eyes. The kind of woman who looked like she'd never been underestimated in a room. Mark leaned on the edge of his desk and spoke to me like I was a child who'd wandered into an adult meeting. It's nothing, he said. Just sign the damn thing so we can move forward. I blinked. Mark. His smile vanished. Why are you suddenly asking so many questions? When did you become so obsessive about everything? Obsessive. He said it like it was a defect. I said, because it mentions the business. He cut me off, louder now, and Marissa didn't flinch. You don't understand business, he said. That's not an insult, it's just a fact, so don't sit here and act like you're going to lawyer me. I felt my hands tighten on the pages. Then explain it. He laughed once, sharp and annoyed. I don't have time to teach you corporate finance at my goddamn office, Hannah. Then he turned slightly, just enough to angle me in front of Marissa, like he wanted an audience. This deal closes this week, he said. If this doesn't get signed today, the bank drags it, the investors drag it, and if it drags, that's on you. I stared at him. You're blaming me. He leaned closer, voice lower, the kind of low that's meant to intimidate without making a scene. There are people counting on this, he said. Employees, families, if you want to be the reason their paychecks get shaky because you need to feel important for 5 minutes, go ahead. I felt my chest tighten. Because it wasn't just pressure. It was humiliation. He was painting me as small, emotional, irrelevant. And Marissa was sitting there watching like this was normal. I looked at Marissa. Is this for the bank? Marissa didn't answer like a neutral CFO. She answered like someone protecting her guy. It's standard for lenders to want clarity, she said. And clarity means you acknowledge that Mark's business remains separate property. Mark snapped. Exactly. I said, but the prenup already says that. Mark's jaw tightened. Banks like redundancy. I said, then why does it mention divorce? Mark's eyes flashed, and for the first time he wasn't careful. Because people like you get ideas, he said. Silence. Marissa looked down at her notes like she hadn't heard it. Mark stared at me like he'd dared me to react. I said, I'm not signing this today. Mark's nostrils flared. Unbelievable. He slapped his palm on the desk, not hard enough to be dramatic, just hard enough to make the point. Fine, he said. Take it. Run it by your little lawyer. But if this slows the deal down, Hannah, that's on you. And don't you forget it. I walked out with the document in my bag and my heart pounding. Not because I thought he was cheating. Because I realized something worse. Mark didn't see me as a partner. He saw me as a risk to manage. That night I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and the prenup binder. Mark walked in, saw the papers, and his face hardened immediately. Are you really doing this? He said. I said, you told me it was nothing. He stepped closer. It is nothing. You're making it something. I said, it mentions divorce. He exhaled like I was exhausting him. God damn, Hannah, you're overthinking again. I looked up. I'm reading. He scoffed. You're spiraling. That's what you do. You latch onto a phrase and turn it into a whole story. I said, why don't you just tell me what it is? He leaned forward, eyes hard. Because you wouldn't understand it anyway, and I'm not going to sit here and beg my own wife to sign a document that protects what I built. I said, if it's nothing, why are you so angry? His smile was thin and mean. Because I don't like being questioned in my own house. I felt the room tilt. He kept going, voice steady, like he'd practiced. Why don't you just trust me? He said. Sign it tonight. We're done. I said no. His jaw clenched. If this slows the deal down, that's on you. Not me. I stared at him. He pointed toward the papers like they offended him. I have investors, lenders, and employees counting on this, he said. I don't have time for you playing detective because you need to feel included. There it was. The insult wrapped in responsibility. He wanted me to feel guilty for wanting to understand my own marriage. I said, "Then I'll have it reviewed." His eyes narrowed. "Do whatever you want, just don't come crying to me when everyone's counting losses because you couldn't sign a piece of paper." Then he walked away. I emailed the attorney from our prenup days. She had retired. Her associate answered. Daniel Rosen. Calm voice. Straight answers. He asked me to send the document. I did. He called the next morning. "Do not sign that in his office," he said. "Bring it here." So I did. Daniel read it and looked up at me with an expression that wasn't surprise. It was recognition. "This isn't for the bank," he said. "This is for your marriage." I said, "He called it boilerplate." Daniel's tone sharpened. "Boilerplate doesn't set triggers tied to divorce initiation." He explained it in plain language. If Mark ever initiated divorce after the 20th anniversary of the marriage, or if he engaged in extramarital cohabitation, the appreciation in value of his company during the marriage could be treated as marital property for equitable distribution. It didn't guarantee I'd get half, but it gave me leverage. It gave me a claim. Daniel asked, "Who drafted this?" I said, "His attorney." Daniel paused. "Then his attorney is either protecting you or protecting the business by preventing a later dispute." I asked, would Mark know what it does? Daniel held my gaze. If he read it, yes. And Mark always read things. Mark liked being the smartest person in the room. Mark liked controlling outcomes. He would not sign something that exposed him unless he believed it would never be used, or unless he believed he could control it later. Daniel negotiated changes. He tightened the language. He made sure it referenced our original prenup. He made sure it had proper notarization and witness lines. When I signed it, I did it in Daniel's office. Not Mark's. Not the bank's. Mark didn't attend. He didn't ask questions. He didn't thank me. He just said, "Good. Now we can move forward." And we did. We moved forward into years that looked stable from the outside. Eli grew into a quiet, smart teenager. Sophie became the kind of girl who could argue you into surrender with logic and eye contact. My mother declined. I handled it. Mark traveled. We grew apart in small increments. Then, right around our 22nd anniversary, something shifted. Mark started dressing like he was going out even when he said he was just working late. He started mentioning a woman at work. A new VP. Very sharp, very driven. Gets it. He said her name casually. Claire. He started taking calls in the garage. He started locking his phone. He started smiling at nothing. If you've been married long enough, you know the difference between privacy and secrecy. I didn't confront him right away because I didn't need to. I knew. Mark wasn't reckless. He wasn't impulsive. He was strategic. If he was doing something, he'd already decided how it would end. Then the Tuesday envelope arrived, and inside it wasn't just divorce paperwork. It was a message designed to humiliate. "Hannah, darling, you will receive nothing. The prenup ensures that. Do not contact me directly." And here's the extra cruelty, he added, just because he could. He sent a hard copy to my workplace too, despite knowing I work remotely. He wanted the humiliation to have witnesses. He wanted me to feel exposed and small, not just broke. He didn't just want to leave. He wanted to control the terms of my silence. And if you've lived anything like that, tell me in the comments. Not the polite version, the real version. Mark called me 2 hours later like he was checking in on a contractor. "I assume you got the papers." "I did. I want this to be civil. You filed without telling me. There's no good way," he said. "Don't make it dramatic." Then he said the line he thought would end it. "The prenup protects me. You're not entitled to my company, his company. Not our marriage. Not our family. His company." I didn't plead. I didn't argue. I didn't ask about Claire. I said, "Okay." I heard relief in his voice. "Good. My lawyer will be in touch." Then he added, like he deserved a medal, "I'll cover the kids' tuition through college. I'm not a monster." Then he hung up. I sat at my kitchen table, looked at the petition, and opened my filing cabinet. The drawer slid out with that heavy sound that tells you it's full of truth. I pulled out the prenup binder, the postnuptial amendment, the notarized copy with Daniel's letter attached. Then I called Daniel. He answered on the second ring. He filed, I said. Daniel didn't ask who. He didn't ask why. He said, when? I told him. Do not respond to him directly, he said. Do not sign anything. Bring the petition in today. So I did. Daniel read the petition, then the cover message, then he smiled once. Not happy. Tight. He told you you'd get nothing, he said. Yes, he's confident. He always is. Daniel looked up. Hannah, do you want to burn this down, or do you want to end it clean? I thought about my kids. I thought about my mother. I thought about 22 years of being the structure holding everything up. Clean, I said, but not cheap. Daniel nodded. Then we do this the way courts like, calm, documented, measurable. Then he asked the question that mattered. Do you have evidence of misconduct? I didn't flinch. He's living with her. I can prove it. Daniel didn't look impressed. He looked satisfied. Good, he said. Then we don't argue about feelings. We argue about clauses. While Mark was congratulating himself, I did the most dangerous thing a woman like me can do. I organized. I opened a spreadsheet. I listed every contribution I could prove. Mortgage payments from the early years. Retirement contributions I left untouched because Mark always needed reinvestment. The years I worked part-time while carrying the household. Receipts for my mother's care that I paid because Mark didn't like messy things. Then I printed everything. Because Mark lived in a world of digital confidence. Emails. Messages. Quick words that disappear. Paper doesn't disappear. Mark's attorney sent a proposed settlement that read like a threat. He offered me the house, but only if I signed away any claim to business appreciation. He offered a lump sum smaller than what I'd already sacrificed in retirement. He offered support for 2 years, then nothing. The message was clear. Take this or get nothing. Daniel read it and said, he thinks you don't know. I said, he thinks I'm still the girl who signs what he slides across the cable. Daniel nodded. We're going to remind him you're not. The first hearing was set for a Friday morning at Middlesex County Family Court. Not dramatic. Fluorescent lights. People waiting with folders. Parents holding coffee like medication. Lawyers whispering in corners. Mark arrived with rehearsed confidence. Navy suit. A watch that cost more than my first car. He looked at me once, long enough to see if I was shaking. I wasn't. I was holding a binder and I held it like it was part of my body. Then I saw Claire. She wasn't in the courtroom. She was outside the doors, leaning against the wall, arms crossed, watching like this was entertainment. Late 30s. Polished. The kind of woman who looked like she'd never had to fight for a seat at her own table. Mark walked over to her and spoke quietly. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the shape. Possession. Daniel leaned toward me. That's useful, he said. She's living with him, I whispered. Good, Daniel said. Let him keep doing everything openly. Judges love open. A bailiff called our case. Separate tables. Separate lives. Judge Ruth Feldman entered. Mid-60s. Gray hair pulled back. A face that didn't get charmed. She looked at the file, then the attorneys. Temporary orders, she said. Property, support, and preservation of assets. Mark's attorney spoke first. Kevin Stowe. Smooth voice. Confident posture. Your Honor, this is straightforward. The parties have a prenuptial agreement. Mr. Levi's business is separate property. Mrs. Levi is requesting a barred claim. Judge Feldman looked down. Mrs. Levi is requesting enforcement of an amendment. Kevin smiled. We dispute the validity of any alleged amendment. We have not seen. Daniel stood slowly, like he had all day. Your Honor, we filed the amendment with the court, he said. Notarized, witnessed, executed in 2016. Attached to our response. We request the court recognize it as controlling given the triggering events. Judge Feldman flipped a page, then another. Mark sat still, but his jaw tightened once. Judge Feldman looked up. "You haven't seen it," she said. Kevin cleared his throat. "We've seen references. We have concerns." Judge Feldman held up one hand. "No concerns until we know what it says," she said. Then she looked at Daniel. "Mr. Rosen, do you have a clean copy?" Daniel handed it to the clerk. The clerk handed it to the judge. Judge Feldman read silently, then glanced at Mark. "Mr. Levi," she said, "stand." Mark stood. He expected her to talk to lawyers, not to him. "You recognize this," she said. Mark's attorney started to speak. Judge Feldman didn't look at him. Mark said, "It appears to be a document, yes." Judge Feldman paused. "That's an interesting answer." Then she turned a page and said the sentence that turned the air cold. "We are going to read this clause aloud." She didn't lower her voice. She didn't soften it. And the doors to the courtroom were open. People in the hall could hear. Claire could hear. Mark's own attorney could hear. Judge Feldman read in a clear voice. "Marital contribution acknowledgement and amendment to prenuptial agreement, executed May 19, 2016. She read the opening paragraph, the part that listed my contributions like line items. Then she read the trigger clause slowly. "In the event the husband initiates dissolution proceedings after the 20th anniversary of the marriage, or in the event of extramarital cohabitation as defined herein, the appreciation in value of Levi Systems incorporated during the marriage shall be considered marital property for purposes of equitable distribution." Mark's attorney shifted. He opened his mouth. Judge Feldman didn't stop. "Extramarital cohabitation is defined as maintaining a shared residence for a continuous period of 30 days or more with a romantic partner, not the spouse." Then she looked up. "Mr. Levi," she said, "are you currently residing with a romantic partner, not your spouse?" Mark's face changed. Not guilt. Calculation. "Your Honor, I don't see how." Judge Feldman cut him off. "This is not a philosophy question," she said. "It's yes or no." Mark glanced at Kevin Stowe. Kevin didn't move. Mark said yes. The room didn't gasp. It tightened. Judge Feldman nodded once. "Then the clause is triggered two ways," she said. "You initiated. You cohabited." Kevin tried again. "Your Honor, we dispute enforceability." Judge Feldman looked at him like he was something she was tired of stepping over. "This was notarized, witnessed. It references the prior agreement. It contains consideration. It is plainly written," she said. Then she said the line that became the quote people repeated in that building all morning. "This court is not a stage for clever men," she said. "It is a place where paper has consequences." Mark's posture changed right there. It was small, but it was real. Judge Feldman continued. "Clause 7, she said. "In addition to any equitable distribution, the husband shall pay the wife a cash settlement of $300,000 within 30 days of filing." Mark's head snapped up. Controlled panic. Judge Feldman looked at him. "You filed," she said. 30 days begins on the date of filing." Then she turned to the clerk. "Order," she said. "Mr. Levi shall deposit $300,000 into escrow within 14 days. 300,000 in 14 days. That wasn't just money. That was a public correction. Then she went further. "Temporary support," she said. "Based on length of marriage and disparity of income. Temporary support is set at $12,000 per month, beginning immediately. $12,000 a month. That's $144,000 a year." And Mark's face showed he'd done that math in his head. But she wasn't done. "Preservation," she said. "Mr. Levi is enjoined from transferring business assets outside ordinary course. No new entities. No unusual compensation changes. No asset sales without court approval." Then she looked directly at him. "I am not interested in posturing," she said. "I'm interested in compliance. If you attempt to hide, move, or punish, I will sanction you personally." She tapped the gavel lightly. Not dramatic. Final. We walked out into the hallway. Mark didn't look at me. He looked straight ahead like the hallway had offended him. Daniel leaned toward me. "Don't react," he said. "Let him unravel quietly." Claire was still outside the doors. She watched Mark approach, and for the first time her confidence faltered. Because there's something sobering about watching a judge read your boyfriend's contract like a warning label. Mark spoke to Claire quietly. She nodded. Then she walked away fast. Mark turned to me, eyes sharp. Not angry. Offended. You planned that, he said. I said you signed it. His lip curled. You were never supposed to use that. And that line told me everything. It wasn't that he forgot. It was that he believed I'd stay obedient. 14 days later, the escrow deposit arrived. $300,000. Not a gift, a consequence. And if you want the real numbers, here they are. $300,000 in escrow, plus $12,000 a month in support. That's $300,000 plus another $12,000 every month. Mark woke up still thinking he'd get away with it. Mark's company had a board. Not huge, but enough. Boards hate uncertainty. They hate court orders attached to the words marital property. Discovery began. Financial disclosures. Valuations. Income statements. Distributions. Mark's company was valued at $12.5 million. Not private jet money. But enough that he'd built his identity around it. And enough that the appreciation during our marriage wasn't pocket change. Mark tried to manage perception. He called Eli. Not to talk, to control the story. He called Sophie. Same thing. He told Eli, your mother is trying to take my company. He told Sophie, this is why prenups exist. Sophie looked at him and said, if you didn't do anything wrong, why did the judge talk to you like you were a criminal? Mark didn't like Sophie's brain. It didn't flatter him. He tried calling my friends. He tried my cousin. He tried controlling the story like he always did. But filings don't care about stories. Contracts don't care about your tone. Court orders do not bend because a man is used to winning. Then Mark made his mistake. When men like Mark start losing, they don't get humble. They get clever. And clever gets caught. He tried to move money, not a suitcase of cash. Mark didn't do drama. He did spreadsheets and euphemisms. He reclassified distributions as reinvestment. He shifted part of his compensation into a deferred bonus under a new corporate entity. And here's what he tried to hide. Daniel and the forensic accountant traced it. $410,000 moved into the new structure in less than 60 days. $410,000. That's not tax planning. That's a decision. Daniel filed a motion. Judge Feldman set a hearing. Mark walked into court the second time looking less confident and more tired. Claire wasn't in the hallway. And this time, the courtroom wasn't just us. There were attorneys waiting on other cases. There were staff moving in and out. There were people who heard the first hearing and wanted to see if the tech guy with the fancy watch was going to get corrected again. Judge Feldman reviewed the filings and said one sentence that made Mark's attorney look physically uncomfortable. Mr. Levi, she said, do you believe the court cannot see bank records? Mark stared straight ahead. Judge Feldman's voice sharpened. I'm issuing an order for forensic accounting, she said. If funds were moved to evade support or distribution, the court will treat it as contempt. Mark's attorney tried to speak. Judge Feldman didn't even let him start. No, she said, not today, not until I'm done. Then she looked at Mark. You are an intelligent man, she said. That makes this worse, not better. And the room heard it. That's what Mark couldn't stand. Not the procedure, the public loss of status. Forensic accountants are not emotional people. They're precise people. They pulled 2 years of records, traced transfers, identified the new entity, mapped it like a blood trail. Their report stated, in language too polite to be kind, that Mark's restructuring appeared designed to minimize marital exposure. Judge Feldman looked down at the report and then up at Mark. Do you understand what contempt means? She asked. Mark swallowed. Yes, good, she said. Because if I find you attempted to evade this court's orders, I will sanction you, and I will not be gentle. Mark's attorney asked for a recess. Judge Feldman gave him 10 minutes. In the hallway, Mark finally cracked, not screaming. Mark didn't scream. Screaming is for people who've already lost control. He leaned in, eyes sharp, voice low. "You're going to ruin me," he said. I looked at him. "You wrote you will receive nothing." His eyes flashed. "Because you don't deserve half my work," he said. "You don't deserve any of it." Then he got uglier, because he couldn't help himself when his control slipped. "I built everything," he hissed. "You just lived in it, you were comfortable, you were taken care of, and now you're acting like you're entitled. Entitled. Like I was asking for a gift. Like 22 years of labor didn't count because it didn't have a title." Daniel stepped between us. "Communication through counsel," he said calmly. Mark stared at him, breathing hard, and I saw it. Mark didn't hate me for leaving. He hated me for forcing him to pay. Back in court, Judge Feldman set terms. The appreciation during the marriage would be evaluated and distributed. Mark would have the option to buy out my share rather than split ownership. A lien would be placed to secure payment. Support would continue until final judgment. Mark's attorney tried to negotiate privately. Judge Feldman refused. "No games," she said. "Numbers, dates, compliance." And then Mark did something so petty it almost made me laugh. He tried to hit me where he thought I'd panic. My mother. My mother was in a care facility by then. Clean. Safe. Not fancy. I handled her bills. I handled her care meetings. I sat with her when she couldn't find words. Mark never did. He said it made him uncomfortable. 2 days after the forensic order, the facility called me. The administrator sounded nervous. "Mrs. Levi, we received a message about billing," she said. "A man identified himself as your husband. He said he was removing his financial responsibility and you should be contacted for immediate payment." My stomach dropped. Mark had called my mother's care facility about a woman he hadn't visited in months. And he did it for one reason: to scare me. I drove there shaking, not from fear of money, from audacity. I walked into the administrator's office and asked for the call log, the number, and the exact wording. The administrator slid a note across the desk. A staff member had written it down. He stated, quote, "Hannah is about to learn what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you." I stared at that sentence. Because it wasn't about a bill. It was about ownership. He still thought he fed me. I sat in my car and felt something go quiet inside me. Not sadness. A decision. I called Daniel. "He contacted my mother's facility," I said. Daniel's voice changed. "How?" I read him the line. There was a pause. Then Daniel said, "Good, keep that note, photograph it. We're going to make that expensive." That night, Sophie came into my room, arms crossed, face tight. "Dad texted me," she said. My chest tightened. "About what?" She held out her phone. He said, "Your mother's getting emotional again. I'm just setting boundaries." I stared at the screen. He used our child as his messenger. And he framed intimidation like it was maturity. Sophie's eyes were wet. "I hate him right now," she said. I took her hand. "I know," I said, "and you're allowed to." Because that was the moment his cruelty stopped being private. It became witnessed. Daniel filed an emergency motion the next morning. Improper third-party contact, harassment through family, retaliation after court orders. Judge Feldman set a hearing within 48 hours. Mark arrived looking irritated, like consequences were an inconvenience. Judge Feldman sat down and looked at the motion. Then she looked at Mark. "Mr. Levi," she said, "did you contact your wife's mother's care facility?" Mark's attorney started to speak. Judge Feldman raised a hand, not looking at him, only at Mark. Mark said, "I was clarifying obligations." Judge Feldman nodded once. Then she held up the staff note. Then she held up Sophie's screenshot. 2 receipts. 2 witnesses. A judge with no patience. She read the line out loud. "Hannah is about to learn what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you." Then she looked at him over her glasses. "Explain to me how that statement relates to billing," she said. Mark opened his mouth. Nothing came out clean. Judge Feldman's voice sharpened. "This court will not tolerate intimidation," she said. "Not through children. Not through vulnerable third parties. Not through staff at a care facility. Mark's attorney tried again. Judge Feldman cut him off. Your client is a sophisticated business owner who has already been warned about retaliation, she said. He knows exactly what he's doing. Then she turned back to Mark. Do you understand what contempt means? She asked. Mark swallowed. Yes, good, she said. Because I am issuing a no-contact order regarding the facility. Any communication goes through counsel. Any violation will result in sanctions. Then she leaned forward slightly, and her tone changed. Cold. Precise. Final. And because you attempted to weaponize caregiving, she said, I am adjusting temporary support to account for documented caregiver expenditures. She looked down at my binder, then up at Mark. Temporary support is increased to $15,000 per month, effective immediately, she said. $15,000 a month. That's $180,000 a year. And she didn't stop there. Additionally, she said, you will reimburse documented caregiving expenses incurred during the pendency of this action, including legal fees related to this motion. Mark went white. His attorney's face dropped. Judge Feldman held his gaze. You can be angry, she said. You cannot be threatening. If you want to litigate, litigate. If you want to punish, I will punish you. She tapped the gavel. Light. Final. In the hallway, Mark didn't come toward me this time. He stayed with his attorney, speaking fast, breathing hard. And that's when the board fallout stopped being abstract. Because a man stepped out of the hallway crowd and approached Mark. His name was Thomas Klein, one of Mark's board advisors. Older. Quiet. The kind of man who'd seen corporate reputations die in slow motion. Thomas didn't speak to me. He spoke to Mark. Low voice. Controlled. I didn't hear every word, but I heard enough. This is exposure, Thomas said. Mark's shoulders stiffened. It's my divorce. Thomas didn't flinch. It's your judgment. Mark said something sharp. Thomas said, even sharper, you've turned yourself into a goddamn liability. Then Thomas walked away. The next morning, Mark got an email from his board chair. Thomas Klein was resigning effective immediately. And the reason wasn't personal. It was one sentence. For cause, reputational and governance risk. Mark called me that night, furious. Not to apologize. To blame. They said I'm a goddamn liability, he snapped. And it's because of you, Hannah. I didn't speak. He kept going, voice shaking with rage. I always knew you were a mistake, he said. I just didn't think you'd cost me this much. There it was. 22 years reduced to an invoice. I said, calmly, you filed. You wrote you will receive nothing. You did this. He laughed, harsh. Don't act innocent. You set out to destroy me. I said, no, Mark. I set out to not be destroyed. He went quiet for a beat. Then he said the cruelest part. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just deliberate. You're going to die alone, he said. And you'll deserve it. Then he hung up. And that was the moment I stopped grieving. Because grief is for something that had love inside it. This was control. After that, settlement moved quickly. Not because Mark found humility, because the room around him stopped feeling safe. His attorney stopped sounding like a bulldog and started sounding like a firefighter. The forensic accountant finalized valuation. $12.5 million. Mark had a choice. Litigate for a year and bleed reputation and legal fees. Or buy me out and shut the door. Mark chose the option that let him pretend he still had control. 3 months after the first hearing, we reached settlement. $1,250,000. Paid in 2 tranches. $750,000 within 30 days. $500,000 within 12 months, secured by a lien on his business interest. Tuition for both kids. Health insurance covered. Support structured. Clear dates. Clear consequences. And here's what that meant in plain numbers. $750,000 in 30 days. That's $25,000 a day. Just to close the door he tried to slam in my face. Judge Feldman reviewed the agreement. Then she looked at me. Mrs. Levi, she said, this court does not award windfalls. It enforces contracts and equity. Then she looked at Mark. and she said the line I will never forget. "The marriage is over," she said. "But your obligations don't end because you decided your wife was disposable." Mark stared straight ahead. He didn't look at me once. When we left the courthouse, he walked past me like I was air. Then the social consequences came in, quiet and surgical. A long-standing client delayed renewal, not because of the divorce, but because of the attempted maneuvering that leaked through industry gossip the way it always does. Another client requested additional assurances. A vendor asked for risk disclosures. And Mark's board chair, the one who'd been smiling at charity dinners for years, stopped returning his calls quickly. Claire disappeared within weeks. No screaming. No driveway drama. She simply stopped showing up. Claire wanted a winner. Winners don't get called a liability. Eli told me later that Mark called him one night, drunk for the first time in Eli's memory. "Everyone thinks I'm the bad guy," Mark said. Eli said, "You texted Mom you will receive nothing. That's what bad guys say." Mark hung up. Sophie stopped answering Mark's calls for a while. Not forever. She loved her father. But love doesn't erase disgust, and her disgust was earned. As for me, I didn't post about the money. I didn't buy a sports car. I didn't perform joy for people who didn't pay the cost. I paid off the remaining mortgage so the house was mine, truly mine. I funded college accounts. Quietly. I covered my mother's care without flinching. Then I did something that felt strange after decades of anticipating a man's needs. I bought myself time. I reduced my hours. I took long walks. I ate dinner without rushing. I sat in my living room and realized I could exist without bracing for Mark's moods. A few weeks later, Sophie sat with me at the kitchen table, the same kitchen where Mark once told me I'd get nothing. She looked at me and said, "You didn't win because you yelled." I smiled. "No," I said. "I won because I read." She nodded slowly. "I'm going to read everything," she said. "Every contract, every form, every line." "Good," I said. "That's the point. Because this was never about revenge. It was about reality. Mark tried to erase me with paperwork, and he failed because I never stopped respecting paper. He thought confidence could override contracts. He thought affection could be weaponized without consequence. He thought the woman who held his life together would stay obedient. He was wrong. If you take anything from this, take this. Read the clause. Keep records. Ask questions. Sign nothing in a rush. And never assume love makes paperwork harmless. My husband filed for divorce and said I'd get nothing. Then a judge read the prenup aloud, and the room went very quiet. "Thank you for staying with me until the end. I'll now hand you over to Julie."
Hey folks, Julie here. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please be sure to comment below. What stood out to me in this story isn't the paperwork or the courtroom. It's the moment where someone decided humiliation would make obedience easier. That's not an accident. That's a tactic. When someone tries to shame you in public, it's usually because they don't want a fair fight. They want you quiet. They want you compliant. And they're counting on you confusing silence with peace. Here's the thing. Confidence without authority is just noise. It feels loud right up until it meets a record, a witness, or a contract that doesn't care how important someone thinks they are. Real power shows up calm. It shows up prepared, and it ends things without raising its voice. If you're listening to this and thinking, "I should have trusted my instincts," you're not late. You're right on time. Read what you sign. Keep what matters. And don't mistake being agreeable for being safe. If this story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you've ever been pushed to walk quietly when you didn't deserve to, leave a comment. I read every one. Take care of yourself,